What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Christian Agent Podcast. We've got an incredible guest for you today. I'm excited to hear what Jess is going to share with us today. But before we dive in, a couple quick housekeeping announcements. As always, if you haven't joined a free community, the School, SKOOL, where we're teaching Christian agents every week, how to sell 3 to 4 homes a month, go check it out. It's in the show notes. I would love to see you there. It's been a blessing to me. It's been a blessing to others. We want to help you grow, thrive, and succeed as a believer. So please join us there. We have our nonprofit, The Faithful Asian. If you're not part of that Facebook group, go in the show notes and join us there as well. The Lord in his kindness is growing that community to bring more Christian agents. No matter what company you're with, it doesn't matter, right? Kingdom affiliation will always trump brokerage affiliation. So I hope you'll come join us there because, like our guest here today, we are encouraging Christian agents to stand up and be bold about their faith, and that's our hope. So just excited that y'all are here as we talk today about surrendering to scale. But before I introduce Jess, I asked ChatGPT, because I don't know why, actually. I asked ChatGPT to roast me, Jess. And so a quick caveat. So I put in transcripts of not every, but a lot of the podcasts I've done. So it kind of knows me. I don't know. The whole thing's still weird to me, right? But it kind of knows me. And so I hope that what it says is somewhat applicable to me. I'm a little worried, Jess. I'm reading this with you right now. So let's see what ChatGPT says. I just said I want you to roast me. So here's what it says. Oh, you want to roast? All right, buckle up. You're out here juggling 4 kids, homeschooling, running a business, meal prepping like a Michelin star chef, and still somehow finding time to work out. Are you trying to make the rest of us look bad, or are you secretly a cyborg powered by sourdough discard and protein powder? You're writing a book, teaching kids entrepreneurship, running a real estate empire, and probably folding laundry while you sleep. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just trying to remember where we put our keys. You've got more daily structure than the U.S. military, and yet I bet your toddler still runs the house like a tiny dictator in a tutu. I feel like they're being nice to me. Hold on, let's try a different one.
Kind of like building you up a little bit.
Yeah, like this is not a roast. This is, okay, let's try something different. That was not funny. I'm like, they're being really nice. I told you to roast me. So here's what we're going to do, Jess. Live on the show, I'm going to ask it to roast me. And we're going to read what it says. And I hope it's not nice to me because I feel like it shouldn't be. Okay, here it goes. Here comes the friendly fire. You probably still use your phone's flashlight to look for your phone. That's awesome. You're the kind of person who sets 14 alarms and still wakes up late and blames the alarm like it personally betrayed you. Your idea of meal prep is cooking a frozen pizza and calling it Italian night. Not wrong. You said, I want you to roast me like this was your first time willingly walking into a roast. Bold move. You sure you're ready? Because you give off, quote, tries to one-up Google in arguments energy. Let me guess, you've got a gym membership you treat like a Netflix subscription. You pay for it, but you're not really using it. Ouch. And a procrastination war in Olympic sport, gold medal every time. But you'd probably wait until the last second to collect it. Want to go another round, or are you tapping out? I think I'm going to tap out, but that was way better than it being nicer to me. Like,
yeah.
What?
They really went loud on you.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. I encourage all of our listeners to go have ChatGPT roast you and see what it says. And, humility. That's what we're about here, Jess, on the show, and that will keep you humble. Not the first one. The first one was great. But anyways, Jess Munsterman is here. We are so excited that you're here, Jess. You are about an hour west of Denver. She has a family with 4 kiddos, ages 3, 4, 12, and 14. She is a community cultivator. And what I love that she said, what we're going to talk about today, surrender to scale, is that you integrated faith into your business, and you've seen that it's allowed you to be a mentor for other Christian agents. And I just saw what you were doing on Instagram and reached out, and now we're here, and I'm super excited for that. So, Jess, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm super excited that you're here. Please give us an introduction, and we're going to dive right into this concept of surrender to scale.
Thank you so much, Garrett. I love how even just that app, Instagram, like a platform like that has connected us, and to hear about what you're doing too. it's really uplifting and really exciting. Thank you for having me here today.
100%. I am so glad that you're here. So we were talking pre-show, right? That in 20, so you were living, and I don't want you to unpack, but you're building a business, right? You had your own brokerage, you're building this out, but you felt like you weren't really living out your faith day to day in your work. And probably like a lot of us, and I'm totally guilty, it's Christian on the weekends, right? And business owner on during the week or whatever. We're agents. Business owner 24/7 and Christian occasionally, right? So you started to just feel this conviction, I think, and you tell the story, right, of you kind of walk this out every single day. And in 2024, right after you were willing to just give away your entire business, asking the Lord what you want to do, the Lord says, no, I want you to stay here, and you quadruple your business, which is amazing. And you started to see that other Christian agents wanted to know what you were doing, and now you've been able to mentor them, and now you're creating content to help them. And it's just really cool what the Lord's been doing. Just unpack that a little bit. Like, walk me through your real estate story and how we got to where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in real estate about 8 years. Really came into this industry out of a place of survival. I was divorced. I had 2 young kids. I had recently been evicted. I mean, I was like absolutely at rock bottom, and I had no other choice. Like, this was out of survival to create a life for my sons and I at that time. We even moved into a little camper when I first got licensed, and I gave myself a year and I said, I'm going all in and I'm doing this. And 8 months later, I bought us a house, and the rest is history.
And when is this, Jess? Like, what's the time frame here?
Yeah, so that's when I first got licensed in 2017.
Okay, wow, so pretty recent. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, went several years just building my business, taking all the advice, doing all the things that we're supposed to do as agents. And I believed that starting my own brokerage was the next best step. And so a few years ago, I did that. I opened up an office here in Conifer, Colorado, with an additional co-working space, and it opened so many doors. And it was everything that I thought I was seeking for, like, that fulfillment in my career. And 2 years in, I realized I was so out of alignment, and I was working harder than I ever had, but I was not seeing the fruit, and I was spending so much time away from my family. I just felt so disjointed, and I realized that I had a Christian. I've been a Christian for many years, but I had not given God my business. It was something that I think came out of so much striving early on, and out of that survival place where I dug in and I worked so hard that it became something that I just completely relied upon myself to fulfill. And I got to a point where I couldn't do that anymore. I was completely just burnt out, and I could not go any further, feeling like I was striving and that I wasn't walking out anything that was like truly purposeful to me in my life. And so really that brought me to 2023, and I wrestled with God for probably 6 months of just back and forth. Like, where do you want me? Is this where you want me? Should I be doing this? Should I walk away? And really just battling, I think, that inner self-reliance of, how do I give this away? Like, I want to surrender this to you, God, but how? How do I do that? How do I let this go and give this to you? And it really came down to just this desperation of, I can't do this. I'm giving it to you, God. And whatever that looks like. If I'm closing the doors of my brokerage come January 1st, then that's what I'm doing. Say the word and I'll go. And I kid you not, like, to the day, January 1st, as soon as I had reconciled in my mind, I was willing to do whatever God led me to at that point. January 1st, my phone started ringing, and it didn't stop all year. And it was like just this confirmation after confirmation that God's like, okay, now we can work through this. Now we can work together. And now you finally have the right foundation, strong enough to go the distance. And it changed everything. My family saw me more. I didn't feel this emptiness inside. Like, I finally felt fulfilled, and like I was where I was supposed to be, and helping, and like interacting with the people that I was meant to be helping. It really did. It changed everything, 2024. And then, come to the end of the year, my business had quadrupled. I felt just such a peace and a shift from where I had ever felt in my business. And through that, I got really loud about my faith. And it opened up so many conversations with other agents like, hey, I've been watching you. Like asking questions, even people who were not believers or like have questions about faith. I am talking to and being able to witness to people and share my testimony because I finally gave that to God. And I feel like that's where we're supposed to be, right? Like we're supposed to be a light and to be able to share our testimony and give that gift that we've been given to other people. And so, that's really where it led this last year. And then just trying to figure out a way to package that up and make it scalable, make it duplicatable for specifically Christian realtors who are experiencing that same gap in their life, really.
So what is that gap? Is it the gap of not acting in congruency with their faith and living that? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Okay. So how does an agent know? Because I love that. We're going to come back and unpack some of that story, but how does an agent know that they have a gap?
Well, I mean, for me in my transformation, it came to you feel it. You feel so out of alignment. And I feel like it comes to the true definition of integrity, right? Like we think of integrity as like doing the right thing when no one's watching or being trustworthy and honest. But in the true essence, integrity is being the same person all the time or being the same thing or like that continuation. And when there's a gap between who we are and how we show up in different areas of our life, if we are putting faith in just this little box over here and we have not integrated it into every aspect of our life and how we show up and who we are, there's a gap. And that's how you identify it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and I've never labeled it as such, right? But I felt that way before we launched the Faithful Agent. Was I just went out looking for it? Was like I don't want to keep going to all of the non-Christian conferences, and it doesn't mean they're not good, but there's a piece of it where it's always about money and deals, and like that just doesn't align with my worldview. And so, felt the gap. Asked a buddy who ironically is in Colorado, and he was like, "I've never heard of a Christian conference. Just go do it." And so we just did. Right? And the unbelievable amount of joy to just be in the room with other believers who are seeking after the same thing, right, and are seeking to grow their business but do it in a way that is godly is so different but so refreshing, right? It is so helpful. It is so real. Because surrender can take different forms, right? Because I'm going to ask you a question here in a sec, but like you said, you might have been surrendering your business in an actual tangible way. It was done. That could have been one thing the Lord asked you to do, right? It could have been surrendering your business and saying, it's not about you anymore, Jess, and your business might have struggled and you might have been totally reliant, had to be totally reliant on the Lord, which we do anyways, but like you said, sometimes we convince ourselves we aren't. Or it might have been surrendering and all of a sudden the Lord said, I'm going to bless your surrender, right? And I'm going to blow up your business, which is what he has done. But how, right? Because one of the challenges I think that I've run across in the Christian agent space is we hear a story of somebody who becomes a believer and their business explodes, or they start prioritizing their family and all of a sudden the Lord brings them a bunch of business, which is totally true and possible. But it's like we don't accept that there's an alternative that you might surrender and the Lord might take most of it away. And so how do we avoid assuming, oh, I'm just going to surrender and then the Lord's going to grow my business, right? Versus maybe scale means something completely different than what you're thinking. How do we enter into a space, Jess, where the surrender is not just a step to success? The surrender is the act itself. Like how do we walk into that purposefully?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good question. And I feel like it really comes down to that heart posture, right? Like there's no way that we can do something or be arrogant enough to believe that something we do or choose is going to force God's hand to bless us in an area of our life. Like that's not how this works. And that's not
True.
not what we're
So
preaching
true.
here.
Yeah.
It really is that heart posture and that understanding that as followers of Jesus, this road is not easy. and being okay with whatever that outcome looks like, wherever he's leading us through. For me, this just happens to look like my winning season, but I've spent many, many years in the wilderness walking that out with the Lord. And for me, in my testimony in that story, I've walked through in that perseverance, and all of that has built up my faith to a point to know that God's got me no matter what. I've gone through the darkness and I've gone through all these difficult things, and I know without a doubt that's what has affirmed my faith. And so although it can look like abundance and blessing sometimes, our joy and our faith is built in the struggle. And there's such a beautiful piece that comes together when we're willing to surrender, no matter what that's going to look like.
It's good. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. I think it's in the Lord's kindness, right? Like he'll keep chasing us until we just give it to him.
Right.
And it's so funny. My wife and I just finished watching like 2 nights ago. There's this. It's funny that ChatGPT talked about Netflix. Unfortunately, we do watch Netflix. Sorry, Lord. But we were watching this documentary, Jess, on this massive tornado that came through Joplin, Missouri. I think it's just called Twister. I don't remember. But anyways, there's this moment where this girl that they're interviewing, who had lived through it, and it's terrifying. I mean, just terrifying footage and all this stuff. She had lived through it, and she's sharing the story. This was, I don't know, 20 years ago. And she's sharing the story, and she said, I realized that at that moment, like I knew this was true, but I realized for the first time in that moment that I'm not in control of anything. She didn't say she was a believer, didn't sound like she was a believer necessarily, but it was her recognition that I realized in that moment I wasn't in control of anything, and I never was. And that hit me thinking of, one of the reasons I don't want to surrender is because, to your point, I think if I surrender, it means I don't get to have a say in what the outcome is now. And guess what? You didn't anyways. Like, we never did. It was never my decision. It's never going to be what I decided to be. The Lord of the output. My job's the input. He's going to determine what happens from that. And so, but we live in this world of false control, right? We live in a world, and I think the devil tries to tell us, hey, you can be in control. You can be like the Lord, right? The initial sin in the garden. You can be just like him. And so we kind of buy into that idea, and surrender is this great idea that we're like, oh yes, as Christians, we should totally surrender. But when it comes to, that means you got to actually let the Lord just take it away from you. Then it's, I don't know that I want to do that, right? So get into this idea. I mean, and you've talked about it so well, but this was years of you holding tight to something. And the Lord, I think, in his kindness, ripping it out of your hands, essentially, right? So talk to the person right now who kind of feels like they need to enter that state of surrender, but they just don't want to. What would you say to that kind of person, or that person going through that right now?
Yeah, I think if you're that person, because the Holy Spirit is whispering that into your soul and into your day-to-day life. And I think, surrender is one piece of this, but our input required to surrender comes out of obedience. And we can let go, we can release that control, but then God's going to ask us to do something. And it's up to us at that point. Are we going to obey and step into that calling, whatever that looks like? And I think that's where we grip back up, right? It's like we might toy with the idea, okay, God, I'm going to give this to you, until he actually requires something of us. And then we try and grab that back. And I believe that full surrender comes from the act of obedience and actually following that through.
So unpack that a little bit, because I agree completely. But unpack that, the act of obedience from a tangible perspective. And agent listening says, yeah, I totally want to follow through that act of obedience, that surrender. What does that look like? Like, where would you point them to get started?
So I actually created what I called the faith audit. And it was 7 days of going through and really diving in and evaluating each area of your life and each aspect. Starting from, are you in alignment? Are you walking out your calling right now and your purpose and using your testimony to glorify the kingdom? Like, are you walking this out. And it kind of goes through several days of, we go into finances. Are we being obedient? Are we being good stewards of resources that we've been given? Our time, our rest, our Sabbath. Those are things that as believers our soul needs. And are we being obedient to that? And so that faith audit can be found on my Instagram, and it's been really helpful, I think, for many people just to get real
Yeah.
and
Cool.
very scriptural based on, am I doing this? Like, how does this feel? Is the Holy Spirit speaking through this and exposing where I need to let things go? And that's when the obedience part comes in.
I love that. I mean, is this, just like the Ten Commandments now, they're a mirror to show us the areas that we're sinning, right? I mean, and our need of a Savior, and faith audit, obviously not the Ten Commandments, but a tool, right, to get really clear, like what's actually going on right now. I mean, it seems like part of your story was just coming to the realization, and not the realization, the honesty of where you actually were, the area where you felt like I just wasn't being authentic. But like you said, integrity wasn't the same person, when I was at work versus when I was whatever at church or with your family or whatever it was. It's if you're a follower of Jesus and you're truly a believer, how do you do anything different, right? It's the same conversation in the political world. A lot of times, like, well, leave your faith at the door. Let's just come have a conversation. Like, how do I do that? That's literally who I am, right? I can't. There's no two parts to this. But to your point, Jess, I mean, I've found myself too, and I know many people, but I found myself that we would get to a point, I've talked about this a lot on the show, but I get to a point like, man, I need that deal. And so I don't want to say anything, because what if I say anything about the Lord and then it becomes weird and they're like, all right, we don't want to work with you anymore, whatever. And then but it not surrendering, right? Thinking that my action is going to determine the outcome. And again, I don't understand in the Lord's economy how that works, because we do got to take the right actions. And like you said, after the surrender, there's a calling to take action on something. I don't know how that works, right? I know the Lord determines the outcome. I know we're responsible for actions. Again, I have no idea. If someone could figure that out for me and tell me, that would really help. Because I'd like to understand how all of that works together. But the point is, it's so easy to be in a community, right? I fall prey to this. So easy to be in a community of believers and then talk and act like a believer, and then go outside of that and talk and act like whatever they want you to talk and act like. We are in an industry where mirroring the personality of the person across from us is an effective sales tactic. And so I go out there and I mirror what they do. And guess what? It works. As opposed to, like you said, having the integrity to, hey, Lord, this is your business. I'm going to go be who you want me to be in this moment. And if they walk away, they walk away. If they want to work with me, they want to work with me. And I can't say the right thing to the wrong person and the wrong thing to the right person. Like that's just how this works. And so there's freedom in that movement and that recognition, I think, there. But we struggle with that, right? So you get to this point where you say, okay, Lord, I'm willing to shut it down. But if you want me to leave it open, I'll leave it open. And it hits. And then it just never stops, right? 2024. While you started to just continue to grow, I mean, you quadrupled, right? So there was a lot of growth happening. Praise God for that. There's a lot of growth happening. There had to be moments in that season where you're like, great, I surrendered. Now I'm good. Let's take control again. How did you, no way you did it perfectly, right? None of us can, but how did you seek to maintain that attitude of surrender when it feels like you probably need to grasp because it's moving so quickly? How did you maintain that?
So much prayer.
That's awesome.
So much prayer. Really, that's what it came down to. It completely changed my prayer life in the meantime, and my reliance in that conversation with the Lord, because it became this all-encompassing faith, as it should have always been. But I was now reliant upon the Lord for every step in my business, and every decision that I would have always made on my own was now consulted and prayed through.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of prayer, and then God just bringing the right people in at the right time. And there was a lot of delegating, bringing in people, systems, and that allowed that growth to continue and really be duplicatable beyond just that 1 year.
I love that you said earlier, right after the surrender, there is this, and I don't remember exactly how you worded it, sorry, but there is then an action that is required, right? It's not just surrender and sit still. It's
Mhm.
surrender, now go do something. I've been studying through First Chronicles, and King David is telling his son Solomon, right? King David wants to build the temple, and the Lord tells him, no, too much blood has been shed on your watch. Basically, your son's going to build it. Well, so King David's getting everything ready, and then he's telling his son, you're going to go build this. And he says to him, go and do it. Right? That's literally like one of his commands to his son is now go and do it. Right? Be strong and very courageous. He says that like a chapter later. And I think of it as, David being, King David being the typifying Christ. Now we're getting into theology, but whatever, representing Christ, right? He's this federal head of the Israelites. And so now Christ looking at us and saying, hey, this is what I have for you. Go and do it. Right?
Yeah.
Go and do it. Be strong and very courageous. There is this requirement of action. It is this weird balance of surrender and now go act. Right? What is it? The surrendering, to your point, and I want you to define, to me feels like just this release of an assumption of control. I mean, that's really what we're kind of doing, right? But when you think about surrender, and I want to go from surrender first, I'll ask you to define what does surrender mean, right? And then how do we get ready to take that action? What does that look like? So what does surrender mean to you? When you say that word, because it is this like buzzword in the Christians, oh, I want to surrender to the Lord, whatever. What does that actually tangibly mean? What are we surrendering? What are we doing?
Surrender to me is a whole body, mind, and spirit release of control and expectation. Anything that I would dream of my own or expect to achieve, letting that go.
So I think about this a lot too. Do you set goals still? Right? That's a question I commonly come up with as believers. Well, I don't know what the Lord wants me to do anyways and what the outcome's going to be. I don't know that to set a goal. So do you still operate in that, or how do you, what shifted since you've really felt like that surrender?
Yeah, so the last 2 years, I feel like through a lot of prayer, there has been a clarity brought to my dreams and of
Mm,
just the desires of my heart, and just, Lord, expose, is this of you or is this of my own wanting? And through that process, it's really shed so much of my own desire,
mm,
whether that be for admiration or fame or, success, any of that. Like, Lord, remove that from me and
mm,
show me how you want to use me through
mm,
this. And I've really come to just this picture in my mind, and that's the goal. That's the
mm,
goal that I work toward every single day. And it includes a homestead for my whole immediate family, and retiring my mom, and having the kids together. And it's this dream that then you reverse engineer
mm,
to how we work toward that,
mm,
and the mission behind that. And for me, so much of that is creating a legacy and breaking these generational chains and curses and sin, and being that chain breaker for my family line. And
mm.
so that's the purpose, and those are the goals that I have. And God's just confirmed that that's the path He has me on. And so that's what it looks like for me.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think and you again touch on it so well. We can surrender and the Lord can place these things in our hearts, but then there's still this requirement for us to go be excellent at making it happen, right? If the Lord told us, anybody listening, if the Lord told you that in 5 months, this is what was going to happen, but you got to do X, Y, and Z first, we would go do those things, right? Because we're like, okay, well, I want that thing to happen, and therefore, whatever, I got to knock down these tiles. What, I don't know, whatever you.
Yeah.
Dominoes. Maybe is it Dominoes? Yeah, Dominoes. Okay. I'm old. I don't remember things anymore. Okay. So, but we got to knock down these dominoes. But is that not what is actually happening? Just the Lord hasn't told us, other than Ephesians 2:10, I have good works for you that I prepared beforehand for you to walk in. Okay, if that's there, because He promised, I know that's there, should I not then seek excellence so that I can knock those dominoes over? So whatever it is the Lord has for me, I'm ready, right? Or I'm ready to walk into that. And so I love that you talk about systems and people, and because there's excellence on the other side of surrender. And if there isn't, again, I don't know how the Lord works, but it's not likely that it's going to come about, right? He can do whatever He wants, but part of what He wants is us to honor Him with our excellence, with our desire to be good at what we're called to do and what we're living in, right, each and every day. And part of how we measure that for you is, did you get your family a homestead, right? Did you retire your mom? It's part of how we measure, did I succeed in the way that the opportunity the Lord to put in front of me. So anyways, I love your heart in that. When someone comes, because hopefully by the time this comes out, your course will be out, right? Surrender to Scale, and they'll be able to find it on your Instagram, which I'll make sure it's in the show notes. But what is that about? Like, what can they expect to learn? What can they look for? Why should they go check that out?
Yeah, so I think when we moved over and talked about obedience and what you were saying, that's the call to go. When we don't know that outcome, I think that obedience, we often want it to be this passive act,
Mm,
but it is so proactive. And I believe that's what you're saying too, like through this excellence and that desire and that work ethic and still all of these traits and characters that, characteristics that God has given you. I want to make sure that when people go through this course that they know what God is calling them to through their own relationship with the Lord, and really just giving the steps for that transformation on proactively being obedient and what that release is going to require. Because for me in my transformation, being a Christian prior to this point, it didn't cost me much, right? It just didn't really cost me a whole lot. But what changed in through that surrender into that obedience was me becoming so loud about my faith. And I think you touched on this before, Garrett, with we're so afraid to offend anybody. We're so afraid of the natural law of polarity that we want to just make everyone happy, right? And we don't want to turn any sales away. We don't want to lose out on anything. But what happens when we start obediently walking this way in our business and our life is that God's bringing the right people to you, whether they're believers or not. He's been working in their life, and he's just going to use you as a tool to be able to speak into their lives. And so for me, that felt like a requirement that then I need to be speaking out about this. I need to be sharing my faith openly, because how will they know? How will they know, right? They'll know me by my fruit and what I share and what I show. And I think that's so much of the tangible transformation that can happen as people surrender in this way is, what does the fruit look like in your life? And that's not necessarily blessing and abundance and your best year ever, but what is that tangible piece? That's my hope, is to really be able to give that to agents as they kind of walk through that journey.
Super cool. I love that concept. So where do they go get it, Jess? I think you said on your Instagram, but what is that? How would they connect with you?
Yeah, my Instagram is jess.m.munsterman. Link in the bio right there. And the faith audit is also in there. That's a free resource that people can grab. And then the course, Surrender to Scale.
That's awesome. I love it. And I encourage y'all to go check it out, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges in our industry that I talk a lot about, Jess, is we just don't know how to be still and silent anymore, calm, right? I mean, I'm guilty. I want to move. I want to be active. I want things to happen. And so a couple of things. I love you just kept talking about prayer. How did you do it, Jess? Prayer. What about this time? I prayed, right? Like just this constant reminder of prayer and the necessity of us communing with the Lord, which admittedly is something that I don't do often enough. I mean, you could do it forever and always have something to surrender and talk about. But then to slow down long enough, agents, and say, where am I maybe moving in a way the Lord doesn't want me to move, but I've just never asked? When was the last time that I stopped to say, this is yours anyways, and take it? Like, is this even what you want me to do? Who created the world? Who created the story of this universe? He did. And so don't we want to stop and say, Lord, I just want to play the role that you created for me. You wrote this book. You made me a player in this book. Tell me what you want me to do. And that starts with this act of surrender. And then the encouragement, like you said, Jess, that once we figure it out, then go play that role, right? And do it with joy and do it with gladness and do it to the best of our ability and excellence. And we need spurring on in that, I think. And so I would encourage agents to check out the course, to check out the faith audit, to follow Jess on Instagram. It still feels weird to say that. Like, I don't know. It just feels weird to say that. Follow me on Instagram and I don't know, I'll post random things. I hope you like it. Right. But that's my encouragement, agents, is none of us have surrendered perfectly. We all need help in that encouragement. And so go check it out. right? I hope that this episode is a blessing to y'all. I hope that this story is. There's so much more we can unpack. But Jess, I'm just so grateful you came on and were willing to share your heart with us. I took a bunch of notes. That's why I was looking down and writing, because it's just impactful to think about this idea of what does it look like to surrender to the Lord and then be ready to take action in what he calls us to do. So just appreciate you so much. Christian Agents, we love you. We're grateful for you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks so much.